Hello, welcome back. This is Unit 9 of Algebra 2, Day 1 of Basic Trig Functions. So we're going to graph some sine and cosine, and you basically already know the exact value chart from the last two units, Unit 7 and Unit 8. Okay, so we're going to fill in, instead of having it in degrees, graphing is always done in radians. Okay, so you may want to add that. Graphing, radians. So whenever you're doing graphing on your graphing calculator, make sure that you go to the settings in the graphing page and change it to radians from degrees. Okay? So right here, if we think of our exact value charts, okay, we know that this is 90, this is 180, this is 270, 360. So if you think of your cross that we've been pretty much going over for quite some time now, okay, this is always cosine, this is always sine, then cosine at 0 degrees is 1. So cosine is 1. Sine is 0. We come up to 90 degrees and cosine is 0, sine is 1. We go to 180 degrees and cosine is -1, sine is 0. And then we come to 270, cos is 0, sine is -1. And then we are back around to the 360 or 2 pi, which is 1, 0. Okay, now this is a wave, so it's basically going to follow that same pattern: 1, 0, -1, 0, 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. Okay, I mean, you could do it backwards as well, saying -90, cos is 0, sine is -1. Okay, or we could continue this pattern again. So 0, -1, 0, 1, 0, -1, 0, 1, 0. So you have everything filled in from this cross. And this cross is not difficult. It's ordered pairs. You've been doing that since probably 6th grade. Okay? So if you start with this every time you have to do a graph, you're going to be fine. Now we're just going to take this information and we're going to put it on our graph. So we're going to go ahead and do cosine first. So at 0, which is my y-axis, cosine is 1. So I'm going to go ahead and use each one of these as a half. So I'm just going to go up to 2 and to -2. Okay, so cosine at 0 is 1. And then at pi over 2, it was 0. And then at at pi, it was -1. And then at 3 pi over 2, it was 0. And at 2 pi, it was back to 1. And if we follow that pattern or use the chart at the top, it's going to go max, middle, min, middle, max. Okay, so this is what you need to kind of go by every time. So if you're at a max, you can't go to a min unless you hit the middle first. Max, middle, min, middle, max. Going backwards, max, middle, min, middle, max, middle, min, middle, max. You have to account for every one of those as you go back and forth. Okay? So each of these intervals counts as a quarter of a circle. And I want you to think of these every time as once you have 3 dots, it's a U, whether it's a upside down U or a right side up U. So if you see these 1, 2, 3, it's the shape of a U. You're always going to do this in pencil, but I'm going to go ahead and show you it in pen. We're going to make sure that this is why we use pencil. Okay, so we're going to curve, hit that, curve up. Okay, so there was one U. I see 1, 2, 3. There's another U. I do see 1, 2, 3 here, so that's just an upside down U. Okay, and then on the ends, if this was a 1, 2, there would be another one here. So that is an upside down U, which is going to show you how to curve this. The curve is going to go this way. It's not going to go like this because it would be 1, 2, 3. Same with this side. We're not going to curve this like this because this would be 1, 2, 3. So this has got to curve like that, as if there was a U upside down. Okay, so do you see that curve? That is a cosine wave, cosine x or cosine theta. Okay, so now we're going to do sine. Well, sine at 0 is 0. Sine at pi over 2 is 1. Sine at pi is 0. Sine at 3 pi over 2 is negative 1. Sine at 2 pi is 0. So if you notice again, we start to follow this pattern. Middle, min, middle, max, middle, min, middle, max, middle. And then you'll notice a whole bunch of 3 points again. So you're going to do your U's. 1, 2, 3. There's a U. 1, 2, 3. Upside down U. 1, 2, 3. Right side up U. 1, 2, 3. Upside down U. Okay? And that is a sine x or sine theta curve. Okay? So really, if you think about transformations that you've learned in the past, if you look at this sine curve and you just shift it, okay, from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, it's the same exact shape. It's just shifted over 90 degrees. Okay? So the domain and range. The domain and range of sine and cosine functions are the same. State them below in interval notation. Interval notation includes the infinity symbol. Okay? So if you notice, the domain is your x values. It's going from negative 2 pi to 2 pi. Negative 2 pi to 2 pi. It goes on forever on each side, so it's really negative infinity to positive infinity. But in this particular graph, it is stopped at those points. The range, however, is the max and the min. So the max is 1, the min is 1. So the range, and it's turning on that point, okay? It's turning on that point, so it's a negative 1 to 1, okay? Which actually it did stop on that point. That's inclusive also. That should be a bracket, not a parenthesis. Infinity never has a parenthesis, never has a bracket, so that is parenthesis, but this had an actual point there, so we include it, okay? So this is always your min and your max for your range, okay? After how many horizontal distance will both sine and cosine repeat its basic pattern? Okay, if you look at this, every quarter, I said earlier, is a circle. Okay, if you think of the unit circle, it goes a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, a quarter. 4 quarters is a whole, and that's what this is. A quarter, a quarter, a quarter, a quarter. So in 2 pi, you have a full circle. If you were to turn this around, it would make the full circle. And same with this. If I took this quarter, turned it this way, if I took this quarter, turned it this way, I would have a full circle. So from 0 to 2 pi is one full cycle. That is called a period. Okay, so they're asking how much horizontal distance from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, that is called the period, the space needed. Okay, to see one complete curve. Okay, so that is the period from 0 to 2 pi. That's also what you're going to look at every time you ever do frequency. Okay, frequency is something else we're going to talk about. Frequency is the number of complete curves from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, so this has a frequency of 1. Even though you see 4 pieces, each of those pieces is only a quarter, and 4 quarters make a circle. Okay? So now let's talk about actual shifts and all of the transformations that occur in trigonometry, okay? Or actually in any function. So the transformations is always the first thing is a positive or negative, and that's going to be the reflection or the flip, as you call it, on your, if the negative is here on the y, it's a reflection on the x. So it's going to take it from here and it'll flip it over, okay, that mirror vision. The A value is your amplitude, which is a vertical shift, a vertical stretch, sorry. It's going to stretch it vertically. So if I had like a 4 here, then that means my max is 4, my min is -4, instead of 1 and -1. B is the frequency, the number of curves from 0 to 2 pi. And then the rest of these are the same kind of shifts you've always had. So if it's grouped with the x, it's always the opposite, and that's the shift horizontally. Okay, so if it said -2, that means it shifts right 2. If it said +3, that means it shifts left 3. This outside that x, it's not grouped with the x, then it's grouped with the y. And the y is your shift vertically. If it's a +2, it's up 2. If it's a -2, it's down 2. And that is your midline, super important. Okay? So you're going to see in eMath instruction, if you use that a lot for videos, you're going to see them skipping this C and they have this as C. Okay? And then later on they bring it back again. So I'm just giving you the standard. This is how it's going to be every time you see it in my packets. Okay? So, graphing. Again, make sure your graph is in radian mode on your calculator, okay? And you would be able to just type this directly in the calculator, but you'd have to set your window. Your window would have to be set from -2 pi to +2 pi on the x min, x max. And then you're going to have to know some basic function theories with this so that you know how high and how low for your y values to go. So we just said that the A value up here is your stretch. So since there's a 3 here, that means that that is your A value. So your max is going to be 3. Your min will go down to -3. Now remember, cos at 0 always starts at 1 if you look back on the other page. So here's the cos at 1, but now I'm going to stretch it up to 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay? And then the middle doesn't change any because 3 times 0 is 0. Okay? And then 1 times 3 is 3, but it's the minimum, so it's down to -3. Then back to 0. And then stretch 1 times 3 goes up to 3. Max, middle, min, middle, max, middle, min, middle, max. So changing this to a 3 just took this cosine curve and vertically stretched it by a factor of 3. Okay, so we're right back to the find the 3 points to make a U. Pretend there's another point out here and make that point to go along so that you see the correct curve on that one. Okay, so always label that as y equals 3 cos x. Now look at this one. This is a negative 4. So the negative is going to reflect this on the x-axis. And then the 4 is going to vertically stretch it. So my max is 4, my min is negative 4, but it flipped. So instead of starting at 1, if it flipped, it's really starting at negative 1, but it had a vertical stretch of 4. So it's going to go down to negative 4. Okay? So it's basically taking this, flipping it over, and stretching it to 4. This is negative 4. Okay, and that was 3 and negative 3. So if I'm at the min, my next point is middle, and that didn't change any. And then the 1 that was here, okay, I would stretch it by a factor of 4, but it flipped. So it's the max, the middle, the min. So again, this cosine curve really flipped and is like this, but then it's stretched. Instead of there, it's going down to negative 4. Instead of here, it's going up to positive 4. Instead of being here, it's stretched to negative 4. So there's that same cosine curve, just flipped upside down and stretched by 4. And then it does it the same thing here. Min, middle, max, middle, min. So up, up, down, and down with all of your correct curves. Y is equal to negative 4 cos x. Okay? Y equals 3 halves. That just means it's going to go up to 1 1/2. Okay, so I'll do that one as a dotted. This is my amplitude. That means my max is going to be up at 1.5. My min is going to be down at negative 1.5. So instead of at 1, it's going to be at 1.5. Still at 0. Instead of at negative 1, it's at negative 1.5. Still at 0. Instead of 1, up at 1.5. So that cosine curve just stretched up to 1 1/2 instead of 1. Stretched down to negative 1 1/2. Okay, went back up, stretched up. Okay, so if we look at this and we kind of make this a dark and dotted so that you can see the difference between the others that are on that page. Okay, we follow it max, middle, min, middle, max. Okay, and that one is y equals 3 halves cos x. So you should understand the basics of that. Okay, I'm not going to cross this one out, but we're not going to do it. If we need to, we can do that as a do now when we come in as a review, since you've been watching this video for almost 20 minutes now. Okay, so now this next one they want you to do without the calculator. And well, we just did that without the calculator. So, and you can check it using yours, you know, at home if you have downloaded that onto your computer, that calculator. Many of you still haven't. So now sine starts at 0. So here's your basic sine. So hopefully you are getting a, you know, understanding of this. And the only thing that's changing right now is the positive, negative. That is going to reflect on the x-axis, which just means it's going to flip. And then the A value, instead of it being 1 and going at 1, 0, and negative 1, it's going to go to whatever the A values are here. So the first one is saying to go to 2. So that means my max is 2, my min is negative 2. So sine always starts at 0, but instead of going up to 1, I'm going to go up to 2. And then it's max, it's middle, it's min at negative 2, and then it's back to middle. So that's one complete curve, quarter, 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 quarter. And then you follow that same wave. So instead of a minimum of negative 1, we have a minimum of negative 2. We go back to 0. Instead of a max of 1, we're going to go up to 2 and then back to 0. Okay? So that is y equals 2 sine x. It's going to be a little bit difficult to label these because each one ends at 0, whereas these at least ended at different places. So just be careful when you label them. Okay? So now this one went to 4. So instead of going to 1, it's going to stretch up to 4. So I'm going to have my max at 4, back down to the middle. My min at negative 4, back up to the middle. So it's middle, min, middle, max, middle. So this is the upside, this is the